Welcome, everybody, to another episode of the Hitting Zone podcast. The Hitting Zone podcast is brought to you by Game 7 Baseball, game7baseball.com. Our friends over at Prime Sports Midwest, which we have two locations now with them. They have one that's 1550 Ocello. Did I get that right? Oh, let's go. I heard it enough. I should know it by now. Down in Fenton. And then we have a new one out in St. Peters, which I've been to twice. So you fans got to get out there for the St. Charles County folks. Get out there, check out Prime Sports Midwest, get all your gear, all your swag, all your drip, or if you just need some old school Franklin batting gloves, you can get those too. You don't have to have all of the cool gadgets.
So this area back here is basically production. They do a lot of the artwork back here. They do the production. So any of that stuff that comes in off of, we'll say, our fanware stores, stuff that comes in off the team stores, a lot of the coaches wear, a lot of the last minute, hey, we got to have it in the next 10 minutes stuff. That's all comes back here. This area is where all the day-to-day stuff that comes in really goes through. The retail store is its own little entity. This is where the real work is done.
But anyways, I'm excited about this show. We got a friend of the show. He's been on a few times on the west side of the state. I'm going to assume he's a Kansas City Royal fan.
Yep, sure am.
All right, and I want you to introduce yourself to the Hitting Zone fans and that may not have seen you on some of the other podcasts with YBM. So if you can just kind of introduce yourself to those who tune into the Hitting Zone.
Yeah, so my name is Gonzo Gonzalez. I am the lead pitching coordinator and now the strength and conditioning coordinator for Mac N Seitz Baseball Academy here in Martin City. Everyone calls me Gonzo. It's just a lot easier that way. So this is my third year with the program. Prior to that, I coached 8 years of college baseball at the Division II and junior college levels. So I've had a lot of experience at the lowest level to the highest level possible that I coached, and it's been a lot of fun at this point.
Where did you coach your JUCO ball in Division II?
I was at the University of Wisconsin Parkside. I coached at Pittsburgh State for Bob Fernelli as well. And for JUCO, I was the recruiting coordinator and pitching coach for Fort Scott Community College under John Hill. And
Fort Scott's, that's in Kansas, correct?
Yes, sir.
Yeah, Pitt State's in Kansas, and obviously Wisconsin. What's in the name? It's Parkside.
Yeah,
I got a little bit of history with there. I played for Missouri Western. So we were in the MIAA as well with Pitt State, and I'm not sure. I think Parkside's in the GLVC. Is that correct?
It was. It's in the GLIAC now. Those two conferences have changed quite a bit.
Yeah. Anyways, I just was being nosy because I was a D2 kid, and so I was just you're up in that neck of the woods. So I was wondering if you had worked for Buzz or Coach Minutes or not. So, and I'm not sure of your age. I'm not going to ask you your age, but.
No, it's fine.
I'm excited about this. We had Justin on, I guess it was last week, and he's a nutrition guy talking about fitness, things like that, and overall, how to build the competition level amongst our athletes. And you being a strength and conditioning coach, it's kind of going to feed into kind of what I think our conversation is going to be like today, and that's kind of the training versus playing. Like what's kind of important. What age group is. Do you need to train more? Obviously, at 11 years old, we're not talking about weight training, but we can talk about movements. We could talk about being athletic or mobile. And, it's been a hot topic, I think, lately because we're seeing how expensive it is to play this sport right now. It's a lot of money, and there's a lot of expectations happening right now, whether it's the parent side, coaching side, whatever. And I don't think we're on the same page in general. And so I wanted to bring up a few topics today that can fire some people up, but I also want to try to give opinions that I think will help. And, kind of going back into this, your skill set is obviously pitching coordinator, a strength and conditioning coach. And so you have both sides of this, right? So you have the training side and obviously the playing side with your career. Is there something now as a young player, 10, 11, 12, 13, then we can move on to the high school side. What do you think is some of the most important things? And then I'll kind of give you my opinion after yours on whether
Yeah,
training or playing is most important.
for it depends, especially at that age. It's 50-50. As a parent, you have to look at your child and go, okay, what does he need more? Does he need to learn how to move his body first? Like, okay, we need to go a little bit more here on the training side. Like, he's got a pretty smart idea of how to play the game. Like, okay, I can invest a little bit more here. Or does he need to be exposed to the game? And like, okay, so let's expose him to the game a little bit more. Let's get him out on the field a little bit more and do a little bit less of the training. I believe the answer is a gray area. It depends on the kid and it depends on the situation, right? But I would say in general, for most kids in that age bracket, it's going to come down to just movement and understanding how their body moves. So if we're looking at the hierarchy of how the body starts to develop, the hardest thing to develop as you get older is quick twitch movements. The central nervous system starts to already be developed, those synapses start to close off, and everything starts to be a little bit more, I would say, just ingrained in the way that you move. So the hardest thing to really develop is speed, and the hardest thing to develop is rotational power as you get older, because you just kind of lock in your body on how it wants to move. It's going to move by the time you get to being 13, 14 years old. So at a young age, if you can teach your kids how to move fast, how to change directions fast, and work on being more quick twitch, the strength will come as they get older. They're gonna get exposed to the weight room. They're gonna get exposed to push-ups, pull-ups, sit-ups. That's the one thing I think as an American society that we get too caught up in is how strong is my kid. Don't worry about that. It's gonna come. It's how fast can he move under control? How quickly can he change directions under control? Because that is one of the hardest things to do by the time you get to being 14, 15 years old, because you have locked in your body into how it's going to move pretty much for the next 5 to 6 years. So that's just my personal opinion when it comes to that.
Yeah, and I mean that's what they are. Obviously, I think you've had enough experience that your opinion should be valid, right? Or it's validated in my eyes because I think about the same things. When I'm trying to teach my kids, and I'm trying to take a 17-year-old kid that comes to my organization for their first year, so they got 2 years left, right, junior senior year, and I'm trying to get them to move a particular way, and it takes a long, long time to get them moving. And while we're trying to do this, there's a long-term process that has to happen that it doesn't happen overnight. And so I'm trying to get my 10 and my 11s and my 12U coaches that, because I have an organization, I'm trying to get them to buy into movement pattern training.
Yes.
Whether it's how you drop step after fly balls, like the hip exchanges, the footwork exchange, all that stuff to me is part of the game that we miss because I don't think we go outside enough and do it. So now we have to
Yep.
train it, right? And so
Yep.
again, I played basketball in the neighborhood, I played hockey in the neighborhood, played soccer in the neighborhood, tennis in the neighborhood. All of those things allowed me to do all these quick twitch, movement changes. In tennis, you're moving from one side of the court to the other side of the court, the lateral movement in basketball to defend. None of this happens. And, when I think about training versus playing, I think about like how, like practice, for an example, a club team, you're part of a club. We talked about it a little bit off the show. The how many times do you practice a week, right? Once or twice, maybe,
Hmm.
right? And
Yeah.
and you had talked about bringing up what practices versus the individual time, the individual skill versus the team skill. And what I see a lot of problem with is in general is I watch club teams practice individual times. They're working on the
Yep.
hitting stuff. They're working on individual skill sets. And I'm like, man, like that should be on their own time. I want to see a kid going up
Yep.
to the facility and hitting on their own, throwing on their own, throwing with a teammate, hitting ground balls to each other if they're working on certain footwork patterns or exchanges. My team time, like you had said on the show, it's like the first and thirds need to be done. This is the boring part of the game, right? The bunt defenses and things like that. But again, it goes to the
Hmm.
long term. What are you going to do in high school
Hmm.
when you face it, and what are you going to do in college? And I have kids that come to me at 15 years old that are not prepared for baseball.
Yep.
And
Yeah.
that's why I kind of thought about the training versus the playing side. Um, in my opinion, I think we should train as much as we can. So I
Yeah.
don't want to have a winter practice doing hitting. I would like to have a winter practice doing some movement training. I want to have winter practices be 4 or 5 days a week with some open gyms. Now, I fully understand that that's a massive commitment. However, those
Mhm.
are the expectations that have been put on me, right? And so if you're
Mhm.
trying to tell me
Yeah.
I got to elevate your player from here to here, which is maybe not a whole lot, I have to have some dedication on your behalf. And it cannot just
Yes.
be 2 practices, right?
Yes, and for me, I think a lot of this starts with the training versus playing, just in American society, right? And whether we're talking about baseball, football, the one thing we value over everything is the almighty win. And if you win, it looks cool. If you win, you feel good, right? So we're constantly chasing that gratification of the wins. But I was very fortunate enough to play professional baseball in Mexico, and during my time there, we also went to a couple of academies, kind of like lend our help to the kids that were there at the academies. And I remember talking to one of the instructors, like, "Hey, when do you guys play?" And he goes, "Oh, we don't play a game for the next 7 months." And that, like, to me, growing up in America playing baseball all the time, I'm like, what do you mean you don't play for 7 months? He goes, no, we train, we hit, we do everything, we teach them the game, and then once everything is done, now we go play, which is a vast difference of what we see here with fall ball, winter ball, spring ball, summer ball. It's like this is why we do the things that we do at Mac N Seitz, why we don't play in the fall. What we do with our 14 through our 16s is we don't play games. You're coming into the facility 4 to 5 times a week, and you're signing up for throwing, you're signing up for hitting, you're signing up for strength and conditioning, and we're solely working on the individual pieces that need to be done Tuesday through Saturday. So when our team practices come on Mondays, we can focus on the team aspect and work on the game of baseball. So now we have 3 to 4 months of us working the tools and the mental tools to be better at what we need to do for our team, that by the time they leave for high school for tryouts, or by the time they come back to us in the summer, they have a better idea of how to play the game of baseball, not only because they worked on the team aspect, but they worked on their individual tools so the team can come together and look better, feel better, and play better.
Heck yeah,
So
man! Like that, and that's what I love about getting the kids after high school ball because they've practiced five, maybe 6 days or played, 5 6 days a week, and
yeah,
the skill set gets better, right? But as soon as summer hits, we got like 3 weeks that it's good, and then all of a sudden they're like, we only got 2 practices this week. We got a hitting day, we got a throwing, or field day, and what do you think we're working on? Individual routines because they don't do it enough on their own, and I
yeah,
think like what I love about what your route is at Mac N Seitz is you're trying to take the game that they're not watching on television and applying that into your individual routines as well. And at least that's what I got out of the conversation because
yeah, yeah,
I think developing the athlete isn't always just the gameplay. And I don't think we're doing a good enough job developing the athlete at our practices because of the individual skill sets that you have to present to the team. Like you cannot have good conversation anymore because it has to be so fast. You got 90 minutes because parents want to get out of there or whatever it is, that the change is. But I think about like my kids and I have a tough time with doing these things because I try to have baseball conversation. I say, hey, did you go
yeah,
see what Pajes did for the Cardinals the other night? And they're like, who? And like they're not watching their hometown team, and so it's like, okay, they know who Mason Wynn is, they know who Yachty
yeah,
is, right? But you don't know that the guy just hit a solo shot to win 1-0 in a great ball game that we had that Kyle Gibson pitched or whatever the other night. It might have been 2-0. But
yeah.
like I can't relate, or they can't relate with me, so it's very tough for me. And I'm like, well, how are we building the IQ? Because I
Yep,
think that's what starts to separate these guys is building that IQ. And I like what you're doing there with like your fall ball. I don't like fall ball. I did
yeah,
play fall ball. I'm 44, so I did play fall ball in high school age groups. I think what we did was we might have gotten 12, 13, 14 guys together. We never practiced. We did our secondary sport, our primary sport, whatever it was. Like I was a football guy too, so I was playing football. I just showed up on games on the weekend and did whatever I was supposed to do. And
Yep.
I just played baseball. I've played baseball with language barrier issues and like learning nonverbals, just being able to connect with somebody, and understanding how the game is played, cuts and relays. Like I feel like I can go anywhere in the country and play with anybody in the world, because baseball is pretty generic in the terms of cuts and relays, bunt coverages. Like it's not this
Yeah.
science, right? Um, and we don't do that no more. And I don't know if that's from like my side of the lack of development, because we have to focus so much on individual stuff during team practices. Is it the lack of watching
Mhm.
television? Is it the lack of being able to spend time? Like you said, you have a pitching day where I guarantee you're not coming in for 30 minutes and getting it done, and you're in and out throwing 100 baseballs in 30 minutes. You're probably throwing
No.
10 baseballs in an hour and a half, and you are having
Yeah.
conversations on whys, and which is building IQ. Am I that's the kind of vibe I'm
Yes.
getting talking to you.
Yeah, so like kind of give you a rundown how we do things. So in the fall, our fall and winter is 25 weeks. So we start today. For the next 4 weeks, we're building from 60 feet out to about 120 feet. So every week we're progressing throwing wise, and every week we're working on a different concept. So like today, as we start out, we're trying to understand and apply what it means to be able to rotate behind lead leg block, and we hammer that concept for a week. And then from there, depending on how the kids react and how they're able to process and apply, we can move on. But because we have 25 weeks, that gives me buffer time to go, hey, like this week, we're doing this again because we did not look good. We did not look clean. And, we didn't apply it the best we possibly could off of what last week's concepts were. Um, One thing I started last year that I'm bringing back this year is once we start to get into mound blending, which should be like right around December, which is when we're going to start touching a mound. Every Saturday and every Friday, we always have what we call a video time. So we have offices back here with about 22 chairs, and it's a first come first serve type of thing. And I don't make it mandatory, but I always tell guys like, hey, like if you just want to learn the game of baseball, the TV is going to be back here and we're watching together. And not only that, what we do is I always start out with bringing out at least 2 to 3 videos of certain guys and go, hey, today we're going to talk about, Blake Snell, or today we're going to talk about Joe Musgrove. Today we're going to talk about Cole Reagans, what makes these guys elite at what they do. And we start to break it down from there. So once we understand, like, okay, this is why Coach Gonzalez is talking to us about this in class, because we're seeing these guys do these same things. They may execute it differently, it may look differently, but the principle is there. Now it's like, okay, now I understand why we're doing what we're doing, and I can try to apply it into the way that I throw, right? So it's just understanding, like for us, it's a building concept, and because unfortunately a lot of kids aren't willing to take the time now to watch the game and learn the game on their own, I have to make it a priority as a coach and put it in front of them. And hopefully they get the idea and go, okay, I need to start watching games. I need to start doing this. If coach is taking the time to do this, then I need to make it a priority for myself. Because at the end of the day, for me as a coach, I really don't think it's a big ask of me to like just sit in front of a TV and watch 2 innings of baseball. What did you learn? Right? Like I was texting back and forth with one of our younger guys who has an opportunity to go and play at some pretty big schools, and his picks aren't the greatest. And I asked him last night, like, hey, did you watch that Padres game last night? See the guy get picked off? Why? And he's like, well, I didn't see that. I'm like, go back, take a look at what the catcher did. Down, pick, right? So he's like, well, why do you do that? I'm like, well, first of all, the catcher can see the first baseman and see where the guy's leading off. As soon as you see the sign go down, you're picking right away, right? Those are the IQ things. He goes, oh, that's a great idea. And I'm thinking, awesome, that's great that you're learning that. But at the same time, you're like, you're 17. You should have already known that. And those are things that we're playing catch up on. So I'm hoping that as we start to get these guys to understand the game more, apply more, and see it more, that they're making the connections and going, okay, let me go try that now. Let me go see if I can do that now and apply and ask questions. That's that's where us as an organization and me as an individual coach, I have the hardest time is getting kids to talk to me and ask questions. Like they want to take in the information, which is great. They want to apply it, but it's very blanket. It's like, okay, I'm going to do that. It's instead of like, okay, but why? And I'm cool. I am cool with guys asking me questions, and I am cool with them challenging me because I want them to think. I want them to understand why and the purpose behind what we're doing so they can make the changes on their own. I don't expect them to see them every day, but if they don't understand what we're doing in class and they don't understand how to do it on their own, then their understanding of the game and the concept isn't there. So as coaches, we have to get them to challenge us and get them to ask questions, and that's to me, that's the only way I've found a way forward to try to build baseball IQ. So
Yeah, man. I think about, and I always bring this up because usually I'm one of the older guests on the or host, I guess. My guests are
mhm,
usually younger, and I have this hard time, connecting with athletes in various ways on trying to help through the training process. And some of the things that I do with Instagram now, I'm trying to, I'm a Facebook guy because obviously my age, right? And I get into Instagram and I'm like, hey, those things that we talked about at our pitching session last, we were talking about, like you said, lead, lay, block. And while I can show it, I don't know that I always get the trust. And I like you said, I don't always get questions because I think they're afraid to ask and maybe
yes.
not get the answer that they wanted or whatever the case may be. And when my coach told me, he said, "Do this," and I did it. I don't know how I did it. I don't know why I did it. I never asked. I wonder if I asked those questions on why he wanted me to play long toss because this has been a topic of conversation for us. Is long toss for me? I used to throw the ball over end zone to end zone. I could throw it through the uprights because he told me I could throw the ball hard. I'd never have arm problems. I never did have any of those, so I bought into it and believed in that. Right. Well, I didn't think about
Mhm.
the athlete that was smaller. I didn't think about the athlete that didn't have the strength I had, the athlete that didn't lift. And so,
Yep.
nowadays it's like I have to find ways to encourage them. And like the video sessions, we have a coach that's been doing it, I think, since like 9U for one of his groups, where he just comes in and he usually uses his own game footage. He cuts and splices some of the game footage and talks about the situations. But what I like about watching the baseball game is one, we try to put scorebooks in their hands to learn how to keep score, but
Mhm.
which is a lost art that, trying to have a conversation with a 17-year-old kid that throws 94 miles an hour and has no idea how to chart. It's like, dude, like, wh- you know, is it because you always been on the
Mhm.
field? I mean, hats off for you being that kind of a player, but at what point are you like trying to pay attention to building your IQ? Well, it doesn't happen because every coach is sitting in there on the dugout in the box, right? And we're giving signs on fastballs to throw, curveballs, when to throw them, and having no conversation to go with it. It's just do what I
Mhm.
tell you to do. And I love every piece of that. I'm not much of the video guy. I'll actually be
Mhm.
quite honest with you. It takes me a lot. I do watch a ton of baseball. I'm a T-Mobile guy, so T-Mobile allows you to have MLB Network. So I'm lucky enough that I have the MLB, and while the Cardinals are bad this year, not playing the best, there are still some things that they do exceptionally well. The way they play defense, the way they grind on the bases. There's some other tangibles right there that they're not playing well on, but I look at that and I'm like, watch Mason Wynn play. How did he make this diving play? Look at the angle. Why is he going towards right field and not towards the second, base bag and on a hard hit ball? And I try to express these to this kid. So I use Instagram. Instagram's always good at making little shorts, cuts or whatever. And I send them to my guys and it's like all of a sudden that connection has built a little bit more trust. Then I
Yep.
started getting a few more whys and I'm like, okay, now I can't stop. Just because I got a little, I can't stop. And that's how I'm finding us to have a little bit of success. And I know that most of the time Instagram is always highlighting highlights, right? It's never the downside of the sport. Um, but again, it's giving me information that the kid can see their favorite player doing something and they can go, I want to do that. And so I need to then
Yeah.
encourage them, you have to go to the gym and do it. Because that's how I grew up hitting.
Hmm.
I was a right-handed King Griffey Jr. I was a right-handed Reggie Jackson. I was a Rod Carew. I was a Tony Gwynn. I was a Mark McGuire. I had to put my right-handed hitters in there. I'm a Ricky Henderson kind of guy. I wanted to pop my chain. Um,
Yeah.
and I even hit like Jeff Bagwell. I actually hit like Jeff Bagwell one year. I don't know if you remember his stance, but how squatty
Oh
he
yeah.
was, big open stance, big
Yeah.
leg kick. And when you're a little leaguer, you could do that, but when you start
Yeah.
facing velocity, you can't really change your stance every week. But I miss seeing kids do that these days, and the
Yeah.
kids that I find that are doing this, throwing the ball off the brick wall, working on exchanges, working on different hops. I watched a kid last night, 11 years old, in his basement working. Coach canceled practice, and he posted where he was downstairs working. His dad took video, just kind of, we wasn't paying attention,
Yeah.
took video of him. He's on the concrete basement in shorts, throwing these little hops like he's on the back of the wall, throwing them, and they're on the downward, and he's diving on concrete. That's a desire and a will that is way different. And that young man, if he continues, he's got to continue this. He just can't stop because he's doing it at 11. He will ultimately surpass some of the guys that are better than him at 12U that stop working. I
Yeah.
want to stop that. I want guys to love coming to baseball practice and love going to football practice, love going to all three maybe in one day, or doing all three of whatever the sports they play, all and of course get their good grades, because we know grades matter. So it's an interesting time frame that we're in, and I think all of this kind of um, with the training versus the playing side of the practices that are built on individual work versus the team side of things, kind of leads into the next, like having conversations about events, like what events to choose, and the playing side of the game. So we've already done all of our work, right? We've got all of our winter in, and
Hmm.
and in March, some of our younger kids start playing, and it's like they might go down to this big event and travel, and they might get the sleeves beat off them. One, I think it's cool to travel, so don't get me wrong. I think it's nice, but this
Hmm.
allure that you have to go to these big events at these young ages drives me bonkers.
Yes.
If you cannot beat your city, there's no reason to travel out of your area, right? You need to beat your city. If you can beat your city, you beat the region. If you can beat the region, then you do what you got to do. What are your thoughts on kind of like this? And I'm specifically the youth, so like 10, 13 years
Yeah.
old.
Yeah.
What are your thoughts on this big chase? Like you talked about wins earlier, chasing wins in
Hmm.
America, that we do this versus, the
Hmm.
byproduct of all the hard work is how you win, right? Your
Hmm.
IQ, the work ethic in fall, winter. That's how you build the winning, not by putting this super 11U group together and trying to pick them pieces from everybody else, saying you're the best thing, since sliced bread. Like,
Yeah.
what is your opinion on like national tournaments, just at the at the youth level?
I, you know, for me personally, I feel like they are a waste of time and it's a waste of money. It's at the end of the day, as a parent, for me, I have a 6 year old and a 4 year old, so I'm going to be coming into this soon. And I think about this all the time to myself, and I talk to my wife about this. Is the only thing that matters to me, is he getting at bats? Is he getting on the field? Is he getting his butt kicked? Because that's the only way he's going to learn. And are we actually putting him in the best situation for him to love the game of baseball? Like that's all I care about. I don't care if I'm playing a team in Nebraska. They're still the same age. I don't care if we're going to a perfect game tournament in Florida. Like this isn't a vacation. All I want is my kid to love the game, get some experience, maybe get his butt kicked a little bit, and understand that like this is where we're at. You're 11, you're 10 years old, keep it in house. And if I see that like okay, like he's showing merit for me to spend the money, spend the time to leave, then I'll do that. But until my son shows the aptitude to play at a high level, to compete and want to do things on his own, we're staying local. That is it, man. It's and we were talking about it before the podcast started. Like, I hate that Little League is going away. I wish Little League was still around at its biggest capacity that it was in, like, the late '90s, early 2000s. I'm 34, and like for me, it was like, dude, Little League was it. And I had coaches, even though they were dads, they were so knowledgeable about the game, and it seems like that type of dad, that type of person has now moved into travel ball. So the coaches that maybe we get it at the little league level aren't what they used to be. And that's why I think parents are following this suit of getting into travel ball at an earlier and earlier age. Um, but getting back to the point, like, I, I just don't see any gain in that, other than, my son gets to do this or that. It's more of a parent thing than it is a kid thing. Because if you go to that 10-year-old and go, hey, did you have fun this weekend? Yeah. Do you know where you were? Okay. It's like,
Just
that
like that
doesn't
too.
matter. Yeah, it's like, where's my juice box, man? Like, that's all I care about. So it's like, I miss that, and I look at my son started playing t-ball this past year, and I asked him, like, hey, do you want to play again? He goes, yes, dad, I want to play again. I want to take ground balls. I want to go out and do this. I'm like, dude, awesome. The love is starting to be there. And if you become good enough, like, okay, we'll start pushing you a little bit more, and we'll do stuff when you get to being like 13, 14 years old. Obviously, this is a conversation I'm having in my head, but until we get to that point, man, like, just love the game. It doesn't matter who you play for. It doesn't matter who you play against. What matters is, are you playing hard? Are you playing the game the right way? And are we getting the results we want regardless of the scoreboard? And that's how I feel. And that's I had the opportunity this past year to coach one of our 14U teams, and we played a lot of local tournaments. And one of the things that we talked about all the time at the end of games was like, hey, what was the score of that game? And I loved that our kids knew the score, and I would tell them, how did you play based on that score? I would ask them, how would you play based on that score? And some of them were very honest and were like, well, we kind of gave up in the third. I'm like, okay, I need you guys to understand that if you want to play at a high level, the scoreboard means nothing, because every individual ground ball that you take is an opportunity. Every swing that you take is an opportunity. Every pitch that you throw is an opportunity to get better or to get worse. And the physicality doesn't matter. It's the intention and the purpose behind what you do that matters. So if we can't drill into these kids' head at a young age to do things with purpose, then it doesn't matter where they play. It doesn't matter how far they go, because at the end of the day, they're not learning to play the game the right way, and the physicality isn't going to come into play. Now, I know that got a little off topic, but at the end of the day, like, I wholeheartedly agree with you. Between the ages of 9 and 11, maybe even 12 years old, stay in your region, dominate there, and if you need to get pushed, then you can start looking for outside stuff.
Yeah, I don't, I don't think you really got off topic. I think it kind of intertwines itself, right? I mean, at the end of the day, like, everything we're talking about is like, that squiggly line of a
Mm-hmm.
baseball player. Nothing's ever easy, right? Nothing's just this parallel line through your history or your career of playing baseball. And you talk about going back to the roots. I grew up playing recreational baseball. I grew up with a
Mm-hmm.
dad who was a hockey guy, with a football guy, and um, they didn't teach us all these cool throwing mechanics.
Yeah.
At the young age, right? They were literally like trying to collect a dollar bill so that we can go to ABC Ballpark and get a pizza and an ice cream cone, right? And I swear that we probably did this till I was 13 years old. And until I got into eighth grade was the first time I've ever experienced like a club ball thing. And I played for the St. Louis Stars and Leon Johnson, and it was one team out of that area. Maybe there was a couple, but we had kids from all over, so it felt exclusive. And
Mm-hmm.
we don't have none of that anymore, and nothing that we do. I'm watching 11-year-old parents like just get on to my coaches about how they need to do something specific to like keep their kid around. And for me, I'm like, I don't have any attachment anymore to this. Like, I'm like, you know what? If they don't want to be part of the process, send them. And I know that sounds arrogant, whatever. I get it. And maybe some of it is, and I'm okay with that. But at the end of the day, like, if you have a parent that doesn't look at the what we're trying to do, which is nothing to do with winning at 11U, it has everything to do with making your high school team. And they're asking that, like, we need this, right? We need, my son needs to be better at this. And okay, I'm going to give you my 3 days a week, but what are you going to do the other 4? Hopefully one day is a rest
Yep.
day. You can enjoy some football on Sundays, right? But everything else,
Yeah.
why can't you go outside and play catch? It's
Yep.
my generation, right? The 40 somethings that are relying on you, me, to go out and teach their kid how to do something anymore because they won't listen, right? No. Make them go outside, I guess. I don't know. You have the keys to the car. Why don't you just tell them what they have to do if they want to be this kind of player? And if they don't,
So
they should make
yeah.
recreational baseball great again. You know what I mean? And that's the
See.
thing is, why can't Legion be good? And if
Hmm.
you're tired of spending all this money, I'm okay with that, right? You want to be exclusive, I'm okay with that. But you have to have the mentality that matches what your real expectations are. And an 11-year-old kid has no idea what exclusive means.
Yep.
You know what I mean? Only the
Exactly.
parent does. But
Yeah.
the
That's it.
parent's
And
driving it to the kid.
yeah, that's it. You're right on with that. And I can only speak to my experience. So the first time I ever got invited to play travel baseball, I was already 17 years old. I was a senior in high school. I was not good enough to that point. And I remember, like, in Southern California, you had No Fear, you had other organizations that were just big time. And as a guy who wanted to play baseball for a long time, that was my aspiration, was to get on a team like that and be able to be good enough to be recognized to be on a team like that. Now it's like it's not that anymore. And and that's okay. I mean, if parents want that for their kids, okay. But they got to understand too, it's like you have to put in time to get to that point. Just because you're wearing a uniform, regardless of what it says on the front, it's the person in it that matters the most and what they're able to do on their own. And so there has to be some middle ground, and there has to be an understanding on the parent side that you have to do something with your child. Like, there has to be time outside of practice where you devote to it, right? And we can talk about playing other sports and being athletic and all that carrying over to different sports. And again, I can only speak to my own experience. My father played professional baseball for a little while, and growing up, he didn't want me playing soccer. He didn't want me doing anything else other than baseball. And to be perfectly honest, I didn't want to do anything else other than baseball. So I got a chance to play year round because that's what I wanted to do. And because of that, I learned the game, and I was able to change that curve and make it smaller for myself because that's all I wanted to do. Right. And I just feel like maybe sometimes kids have other priorities now, and there's other things to do. And it takes them away from whatever main sport it is, whether it's football for a kid or it's soccer for a kid. And, they're putting them in other things, which is great. But if soccer is their main sport, if baseball is their main sport, if badminton is their main sport, you have to spend time doing that main sport to get good at it. You can't expect to walk away from it and come back to it, and whatever you worked on Monday, and if you didn't pick up a baseball or picked up a bat for 6 days and come back to Monday and it's the same, don't be the parent throwing up your hands going, why isn't little Johnny getting better? Because I'm going to throw up my hands and go, why didn't you work on it with him too? It's a two-way street. Like, we have to come together as coaches and parents and help what matters most, and it's the child. Help us help them make the best experience for them so we are able to have the love for the game and see them flourish physically in the game.
Yeah, and I think about so I grew up in a time frame where, like, I was I grew up in in the county, but I grew up in a school that had a melting pot of people, right? So I had played with Latin
Mhm.
athletes, I had played with black athletes, of course, white athletes, and I never knew anything that was about color. And so for like the last couple years, what I've been trying to do is find out why we have a less population playing ball, and why we have more here, less here. Why does this group, or why are they competing a little bit differently? And you're starting to see the change in the big leagues. You talked about it a little bit earlier, playing down in Mexico, and you said, they're not playing, but maybe 4 months out of the year or 5 months out of the year, where, this drive in America is something different. And I'm like, growing up again, being outside, throwing a bottle cap, throwing a frisbee, throwing a tennis ball, hitting cork balls, like wiffle ball, all of these things were everyday activity that I had no idea at the time was making me better, right? I wasn't. I was just being a kid. I was just playing, right? But I grew up in,
Mhm.
whereas like the neighborhood I grew up in, I had to, if I wanted to play with the kids, they were all older than me. I had to produce. If I didn't want to be
Yeah, you had
picked
to hang.
last and get my feelings hurt, right? I had to do whatever it took to play. Nobody coached that. I know that that's some inner desire things, right? But that goes to the small percentage that really make it into college baseball. I was lucky
Mhm.
enough to do that. Well, I had that little. I wasn't even good enough though to play beyond that. I wasn't even good enough to finish my college career because I wasn't a smart student. So, I made some different choices. But like I think about, where is the level of like training? Like, when I think about group training, I loved hitting with my friends. And the reason I loved hitting with my friends was, if my friend hit a round of six and just hit six lasers back off, off the back wall or pull side, I was like, I gotta be better than that. I didn't say it, right? I didn't want to be that kind of teammate. I just wanted to
Yeah.
try to encourage that. And what it did is it helped the guy behind me get a little bit better because he wanted the same,
Mhm.
and the guy that we were all trying to beat, right,
Mhm.
didn't want nobody to beat him. So
Yeah.
it created this internal competition that I don't think is a desire anymore. Because kids, like, it's crazy. Like, I still go the old school route. Like, if we're scrimmaging, we'll do like we'll play bunt games in practice, and it's just the infield versus hitters. And I'll have kids pick, like captains. I'll pick the youngest or the oldest guy on the team. The youngest gets the first pick, and he'll make that first pick, and everybody's like, who's going to be the first guy? And I'm like, you don't know what I'm doing yet. So
Yep.
the worst player on the team might be the best bunter and the fastest kid. He got picked last and ends up being the best pick. And I try to do things like that because, one, it's uncomfortable, right? It's
Yep.
uncomfortable to be the last kid. You kind of get a little, something on your shoulder. But again, it's like, who's the first pick? Am I going to pick my buddy, or am I going to
Yep.
pick the guy that might help me overall? And it's there's none of that anymore. There's no confidence in it anymore. And I don't know how to get back to it other than it's the failure thing. You talked about it with your son. I want him to get his teeth kicked. You didn't say it like that, but you want
But
him
yeah.
to
Yeah.
deal with a little bit of failure,
Yep.
because those are the coaching moments that you need. And because I think baseball is pretty much, I'm not sure there's anywhere else that you can fail this much and be that good.
Yep. You have
And
to be a little bit crazy. Yeah.
yeah, and you have to love that, and if you don't love that, then again, that's fine, because there is a place to play baseball. And I do think that every kid should have the opportunity to play baseball. I do not think every kid should play travel ball. There's no expectations set by parents. They don't want to do it at home. And you're in Kansas City area. I mean, you're in Kansas City, right? Kansas City Mo or
Yep.
Kansas.
Yep.
And,
Yep. Kansas City. Yep.
and so I'm thinking, you're 4 hours away from us, and you have the same thought process. You're 10 years younger than I am, still have the same thought process. You played college baseball, you coached college baseball. And for whatever reason, that parent cannot latch on to the idea that they're wrong. Or they don't even
Yep.
have to be wrong, just it's different within their thought process, right? So I'm like, all of these folks around, I've got people that we've done in Louisiana and Texas, obviously in Kansas City, and it's all like-minded. We have
Yeah.
to get outside. You have to rep somehow, and maybe you can luxury to have indoor opportunities, but there's always a place. There's always a park. If you have to spend 3 minutes to go walk to it because the yards aren't the same size they used to be, so
Yeah.
be it. I learned how to
Yep.
slide in a pool.
Yep.
I used to have a circle pool, right? And so we would create the little tornado. I don't know what the heck they call them in the water, but you'd
Yep.
run around in the pool, right? And then what we would do is we would just go underneath and slide along the edges, like the figure four. And that's literally how I learned how to slide. And nowadays, kids have no idea. And it's like at
Yeah.
15 years old, I'm teaching a kid how to slide feet first. That's insane to me.
It's Yep.
And
Yep.
I don't, and
Yeah.
other
We.
than having these conversations and for me, I get this sense of gratification because there's other people out there that feel the same way as me. So I'm like, man,
Yeah.
just how do we be kids again and have that fun?
And that's the hardest part. And I can, again, speaking of my own experience with my own kids, is we I live in an apartment complex, so for me it's kind of tough, but I make it work. I bought some nets, I bought some hitting mats, and I'm like, hey man, we're gonna go downstairs and we're gonna hit. And at first, when I first started doing that with my son, it was me pushing him because he's a kid, he doesn't know any better. I'm his father, I'm not his friend, and I want what's best for him. After week one, it became, hey dad, I gotta go hit before I brush my teeth. Okay. And it's just like he understands, and it became, I want to hit, not I have to hit. And for me, it's like whenever I get an opportunity to get on the field, like a high school field out here, I got to sneak on, I'll do that. I don't care if I get told to get off, but if my son comes to me and says, I want to take ground balls, dude, we're going. I don't care if we got to do it in a parking lot, we're
Yes,
going to
sir.
do it. He wants to. And if he wants to, I as a parent, I have an obligation to feed that inner drive. The moment I decide not to do that is the moment that he doesn't want to, and I kill that inner drive. So, and I mean, it could be dance. I don't care. But as long as he has an inner drive to compete and do something with his life, with baseball or anything else, I am feeding a person that's going to become a productive adult. And that's, at the end of the day, like that's what I'm looking to do, right? And if I can teach my son how to be a productive human being and use the game of baseball to do that, then I feel like I'm doing my job as a coach and as a father and as a parent. And that's what my dad did for me. My dad was no short of a hard-nosed man and expected a lot of us, my brother and I. And was he tough on us? Absolutely. Was it sometimes unnecessary? Yeah, it was. But I tell you what, man, if, if it wasn't for my father and the way that he pushed me, and yes, it was tough love, I would not have be as successful as I am today as a coach and as a father if it wasn't for his tough love. And sometimes, getting back to your point, kids need that. I don't know if every coach and every parent is willing to go there anymore. Whether it's socially acceptable or whatever the case is, I think the bridge that you're talking about wanting to cross, which I want to cross too, is a hard one to do because everyone's raised a little bit differently. Everyone has different expectations for their sons or daughters, and it's sometimes can be hard for the parent to sit back and let someone else coach, parent their child.
Yeah, you're right. And then you have to look at it sometimes like that because they spend a lot of time with us. And so there is some coachability things like, body language stuff that it's almost like
Mhm.
parenting versus being that coach side. So I 100% get that. And I had a dad on me that was pretty tough. And I also think that's the same reason why I'm in the position I'm in today with dealing with things. And that tough love allowed me to accept some things
Yeah,
that may be uncomfortable, and we say it all the time on the show. Everybody has a little different version of it, but being comfortable with the uncomfortable, and nobody likes to get yelled at, man. That's the obvious.
yeah,
Nobody wants to get yelled at. Nobody wants to be told they're not good at something or they can't do something. However, the cool thing about it is whatever we are talking about, you do have the ability to go change that. And before we go, I had a quick story on one of my athletes. At 14 years old, I got him and he told me he was a shortstop. And he's slow. He's slow of feet. really couldn't get to much baseball, so probably more of your third baseman, but not the size, and maybe range you over at second base was probably going to be the long-term goal. And I told him that, and he upset, right? Of course. And I let it be. He come up to me the next day at practice, said, "Hey, what do I need to do to be your shortstop?" And I said, "You have to throw a ball off the wall. You have to have 1,000 ground balls this month, whatever the number was that I had." And now he's still slow of feet, right? He's still probably not long term a shortstop, but he should be able to field in college. He's got good enough fielding skills that he can do that. And I'm like, he might change first baseman, second base, whatever. But he literally bounced the wall off the basement. Like his dad removed the carpet, removed obstacles so that he could throw a ball off there because he wanted to be a shortstop. And he is my shortstop, and he makes plays that he couldn't throw on the run. He couldn't do none of those things until he practiced those reps, and now he doesn't come out of that position. Again, the
That's
five
cool.
six the 5'6" gap, he ain't getting that. The ball up the middle, he's not getting that. However, he makes routine, and he's a step and a dive kid. I'll take every piece that he throws on the run with all the turf stuff today. Man, it's not a smoother kid that we have on our team on shortstop. Now, there's better shortstops out there. Don't get me wrong, because there's other tools that these kids have that he don't. The arm
Mhm.
strength, the footwork, things like that. But to me, it was that moment that makes me proud to put him in my lineup every day because he had worked on his own. He did not ask me to hit ground balls. I would do it if he was there, if that was the situation. But again, he did whatever he had to do. And when you feel
Mhm.
like that as a human, it feels like you're doing the right thing, even though sometimes it may be doing it wrong. But over a
Yeah.
thousand reps, you're probably getting 750 of them, correct.
Yeah.
So I love this, man.
Absolutely.
I feel like this could be a 3 hour long conversation, which that's not what we're gonna do because everybody's got to go to work today. But I
Yeah.
want to get you back on, Gonzo. I love every part of this. I tell you what's crazy is you have this. I don't know how you are as a coach. I'm pretty loud and I'm over the top. You have this very calming voice, and so I feel like when you're coaching, do you ever just like yell, or is it more one of those
Well,
guys that are like, if you raise your voice, like the world shuts down because you don't raise your voice? I got a feeling the way you talk is just smooth.
well, if you ask my players, if I'm getting loud, you're paying attention, and that's the way I like it to be. It's like, hey, I'm here, and if you make me get here, you eyes on me now, and that's that's how I like to be. I like to be in the background, calm and collected. Like, hey, let's talk about this, blah blah blah. Go from there. But if I need to get here to get your attention and get you to understand that this is important, I got no problem going there.
Yeah. I'm my best when I am somebody else's assistant. I have the hardest time of being the head coach. I do a much better job. I coached 8 years at Wash U down here in D3 in St. Louis.
Yeah,
And in the
yeah,
background, I was always calm. I could always have those good conversations. And now as a head coach, I'm like, man, I'm all over my kids. If we have because I feel like practice has got to be locked in, right? Like
yeah,
and if we have a
yeah.
lazy practice, I am frustrated. And I let my guys
Mhm.
know at practice, but again, I'm just loud in general. And it's like, I feel kind of calm having a conversation with you. So I feel like in a month or so, Gonzo, I have to reach out to you again and bring you back on the show and talk more baseball because obviously we're going to get through the fall so we can have more conversations on your thoughts on fall. How'd your fall workouts go and some things like that. And before we go, Gonzo, can you give our fans here on the show? Can you give them a place to follow, maybe you specifically or your group up there with Mac N Seitz?
Yeah, so we do have our own Mac and Seitz page on Twitter. It's just Mac and Seitz Baseball Academy is the handle, and then my personal handle on Instagram is Coach underscore GSP 22, and you'll see it. I got a big Mac and Seitz shirt on that you'll know it's me. But normally on there, I'll post stuff of our players. I'll post stuff about like pitching concepts, different videos you can follow, med ball drills, plyo drills, anything. So yeah, give it a shout and take a look.
Yeah, perfect, man. Before I let you go, I got one more question. You said that you played professionally in Mexico, correct? When did
Yes,
you play there? What years or
that was
year?
2013. So I played at Pittsburgh State between 2011 and 2012, and then after that, I got picked up as a free agent, and I played for the Mighty Nettles of Ensenada, which is the AA team for the Diablos. So I was down there for a little while. I got released, and I had an opportunity to come back to Kansas and play for the Wichita Wingnuts. They were the Wingnuts then,
Yep.
but at that time, I was like, listen, I inner monologue, right? It was like, do I want to play for $100 or do I want to start my coaching career? And I was like, well, no one's going to sign a 5'8" righty throwing 92. It's time to hang him up. So
I mean, I'd have signed you on our men's league. The reason I asked that is I played ball with a guy named Lee Cruz. Lee Cruz played in
uh-huh.
Mexico for maybe 4 or 5 years, had like 100 homers down there, was a perennial 15, 20 homer guy down there. And I wonder if there was any connection. I think he is actually gone by then. He came out of the University of Tampa D2 school and was picked
Yeah,
up
Tampa's
by the
crazy.
Astros
Yeah,
or something like that, or White Sox, whatever it was. But I just wanted
yeah,
to know if there was a connection there or not, because I played ball as an adult with Lee Cruz. I played till I was 40. I
yeah.
think I played till I was 40 years old, which is awesome, man, to be able to be healthy enough to play that game. But anyways, I appreciate it, man. Thank you for everybody that's
One
following
more.
the show. Go ahead.
What years are you at Wash U? Because I feel like I might have met you because I was a pitching coach at Carthage College in Kenosha, Wisconsin. And we used to come down to the St. Louis area to play like Fontbonne and some other schools.
So when I was at WashU, I had for the first couple years I was on both sides. So I coached baseball and softball, but I ended the last 5 or so strictly softball. So that would have been 2013. To
Okay,
2013
yeah,
to 2015, I think I was on dual. And my job was just kind of infield coach, hitting. I was a volunteer then, and then
yeah,
kind of moved on. But we got Coach
okay,
Bloom down from Wisconsin, maybe Parkside or something. Maybe it wasn't Parkside.
yeah.
I think he came from a D3 school, which was like a powerhouse. Maybe it was Whitewater or something like that.
It could have
Um,
been Whitewater, Concordia, yeah,
but you talk about a fantastic baseball mind, man. Coach Pat Bloom is a heck of a baseball mind, and WashU's lucky they got a coach like that. And you just never know
cool.
the influences, and that's what I love about kind of what you're talking about earlier is just the long term journey of a coach. You
Yeah,
end up being much more than that after these kids move on. So Gonzo, I appreciate it, man. Go check out his socials, which he gave and which we'll have on the show. Which you could go to Youth Baseball Midwest on YouTube. You can hit that little dinger. That's the way you can get notifications for shows like this, because I'm going to have you on again, Gonzo, and I need people to listen to this because this is gold. And hit that dinger so that way you know what's happening. And again, thank you to YBM and Brian French for allowing me to do this as a platform to talk baseball. I love it, man. But anyways, Gonzo, I appreciate it, man. Thank you. And
thank
and
you very much.
any advice for pitchers? I'm obviously was a pitcher. I'm a hitter. So what advice
Yeah.
do you have for some of our pitchers out there?
The first thing that comes to mind is learn how to read a swing. We don't do that enough. Learn to read takes, learn to read a swing. When you start to understand what a hitter's trying to do in the box or what he's not looking for, it makes your job a lot easier. But if you're just throwing to throw, you're going to find yourself in trouble.
Yeah, I like that. Usually I was expecting like the generic kind of answer there, and I was like, read swings, because that I caught. So reading swings was a big
Yeah.
deal for me, because I'm trying to hit whatever you're throwing to me a country mile. So Gonzo, I
Yep.
appreciate it, man. Thank you for your time.
Thank you very much. Have a good one.
You too, buddy.